Hey everyone, welcome back to the Boston Barristers. We're doing a year-end recap of all of the remarkable cases our firm has handled in the past year. We won big victories, helped incredible clients, and today we're sharing the moments that defined 2025. With me is the attorney who's monumental to all of the victories here. The one who has the most cases at the firm, the one who started this firm, our founder and managing attorney, Matthew Peterson. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. How are you, Elijah?
Doing fine, doing fine. I'm feeling fresh this 2026. But let's start strong, Matthew. What was the craziest case that you handled this 2025?
Oh, man. And yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to go over all of our victories today. I think that would be like a 6-hour episode, but we're going to try to hit the highlights or some of the highlights. Craziest case I had was, oh man. So I had this woman who was traveling. She was doing a motorcycle traveling from like somewhere down south to north of Boston. She was driving through Boston on her motorcycle. She had a little .22 pistol in the back of her motorcycle, just in like, cause she was sleeping places in tents, things like that. She thought there might be coyotes, like a small little pistol. And she ends up getting in an argument with somebody in the roads in Boston. Like they were trying to turn left. She was trying to turn left and they got in a shouting match. And this woman said that our client mentioned that there was a gun somewhere. She said, "You don't want any of this smoke," which, I'm not into the lingo nowadays, but smoke, the other person assumed it was a gun, but that doesn't necessarily mean gun. Smoke can mean an argument, whatever. Police stop our client. They start to arrest her and search her motorcycle. And our client at some point admits like, "Oh yeah, I've got a gun, but I don't know where it is in there." So we challenged it at a motion to suppress in the court in Boston. We argued that she was stopped illegally, that they had no evidence she did anything wrong. But the most important thing is that they did this inventory search of her car. In an inventory search, you're supposed to document the things that are in a motorcycle or a car to protect the property of the person. So you're supposed to like take good notes about, hey, what property is in here when you're going through it. They didn't even turn over anything that they found, but they all had body cams on. And we saw that they found a laptop in there. They found phones in there that they didn't document. So they weren't really doing an inventory search, but they really had no evidence she did anything illegal either, because having a gun by itself is not a crime in Massachusetts, even though it often seems like it. And you're allowed to travel through states with a firearm as long as you store it properly and as long as you're going someplace that you're properly licensed and coming from someplace you're properly licensed. So we ended up challenging that motion, or we filed a motion to suppress, challenge the search in court, and we ended up winning. And the judge threw out the gun. This is like the beginning of this year, threw out the gun, and the case ends up getting completely dismissed. So this is a woman who was facing 18 months, mandatory minimum, felony record, all of that, who ends up walking out with just dismissed cases. And it was something that, we have this a lot where people come up to us and they're like, "No other attorney will take my case. Every attorney says I'm just going to go to prison." And then we say, "Well, listen, we'll try. We'll do whatever we can." And you just got to keep fighting. You just got to not give up. You got to fight it every way you can. And sometimes you win, like this case. It seemed like an impossible case when we first got it. It seemed like an impossible case to every other lawyer she talked to. And we ended up winning it, and it was a great feeling. So that was probably the craziest issue there, just based on the body cam, how awful the case seemed, things like that we were able to get this client out of Massachusetts without a criminal record whatsoever.
And regarding unwinnable cases, just like you've mentioned, how do you muster the strength or the courage to kind of take these kinds of cases on? If other attorneys said that these are impossible cases, like what gives you the confidence to still push through with the case?
I mean, you've got to take it one step at a time, right? Like I always say that when people come into me, there's no point in just giving up. There's no point in saying, "All right, well, it's just time to go to jail." You might as well do your job. You might as well fight it. And what I always say is, like, I imagine a case like a sweater like this one. And you just pull every string you can out of the Commonwealth's case, the government's case. You might find a string here and you say, "You know what? I wonder where this string leads to." And you pull it. You pull this one out, And then at some point after doing that, a lot of times the sweater just falls apart. Their case falls apart completely. And you never know when that's going to come. So anytime you have an opening, you fight it, you hit that one spot over and over and over again as much as you can. You do everything you can and you outwork the other side. You out lawyer them. And it doesn't always work, but it works a lot of times. And it works enough for us to keep doing it in every case we have. Whether that's a motion to suppress, a trial, motion to dismiss, like in that case before, one of the things that broke it open was that there was body cam of one of the officers talking to the alleged victim, the woman who said she got in this road rage incident with our client. Well, that didn't come up in the initial body cam footage. They turned over body cam and we looked through it, this hours and hours and hours. And we said, you don't have body cam of this interaction with this woman. And the DA was like, oh yeah, well, we don't have it. Okay, well, go find it. And we fought that in court over and over and over again and that was one of the things that ended up winning the case, is just being relentless, never giving up on people, and there's just no point to giving up on people like that. You might as well do your job. You might as well fight for them, because sometimes it works out.
Yeah, I remember what you said about the philosophy of this law firm. I remember the law office of Matthew Peterson takes cases personally, and I think it was because of your background as a starting attorney. Could you tell us about that, Matthew?
Yeah. So when I first got started in Alabama, I worked for a judge, and after I stopped working for that judge, it was just a year-long clerkship. Then I went out on my own and I practiced in front of him one day. I remember he ruled against my client, sent him to jail or something like that. And he said I looked very disappointed. He said, Matthew, you can't take this work personally. And like, to a certain extent, yeah, you don't want to carry it with you. If I put myself in every client's shoes, I would never be able to live with myself, because all of my clients are dealing with tremendous stress. And I try to do the best I can for them. So you can't like absorb all of that. But at the same time, I never want to not take a case personally. I never want to just feel like, okay, well, I'm just doing my job. I'm just going to go through the motions with this case and, oh, well, they went to prison. So what? Like, it's still one of the most traumatic things for me to see a client that, I was just standing outside the courtroom with, chatting about their family, and then to see them taken into custody. And I never want to give up that feeling of being very disturbed by that loss of liberty to our clients, the loss of the time with their family, things like that. So yeah, I always want to take their case personally, in the sense that we're going to take your case and we're not just going to treat you like another job, right? We're not remodeling your shower. We're dealing with something that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. And if we're not taking that personally, we're not doing our job the right way, and the way that I want to do it as in this law firm.
Yeah, and as an attorney, taking cases personally could also take emotional toll on you, since, we can't guarantee that every client that goes through our law firm wins. Anyways, let's talk about wins now. What about the biggest win of the year? If you're taking cases personally, I'm sure that these victories, they feel greater. You
Oh
took
yeah.
it personally. You really took it upon you to treat this person as if he's a family member, or as if you were in his shoes. So, what's the victory that really made you proud this year?
Yeah, so I had, over the summer, we had a couple of big gun victories that really affected me a lot, and that because I got to know the people throughout the case. The first one, our client was from New Hampshire originally, came down here, and he got in a fight with his wife, and she ended up calling the police. She claimed that he hit her. There were some injuries on her. After they arrested him, the police talked to the wife, and she said, oh, by the way, he has a gun in his car. Well, at the police station, they told our client, hey, we're not going to ask you any questions. They read him his Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent, blah, blah, blah. But hey, we're not going to ask you any questions. We're not going to investigate you. When they found out about the gun, though, they wanted to change into investigating officers. They wanted to investigate whether he knew about this gun, and they wanted to build that case against him so that they could nab him for that gun. So they came up with a scheme to ask him about New Hampshire and to get him to admit to the gun. And all of this is on body cam. Like, we got them planning the interrogation. We got them asking him about it. And the gun laws in Massachusetts are so screwed up that he didn't realize what kind of trouble he was in for admitting to this gun that he'd legally bought in another state, right? What ended up happening was, we ended up having to go to trial on the case. We lost the motion to suppress. we end up going to trial. And my opening statement, I said, the DA is going to ask you, or going to show you a video of him confessing to this gun. I'm going to ask you to ignore that. And the jury looked at me like I was crazy. But then sure enough, the judge instructed them, if you don't find that this is voluntary, this statement is voluntary, if you find that they tricked him or something like that, you can disregard it. And sure enough, they disregarded it and they found him not guilty of the gun. So this guy who was almost definitely facing 18 months and a felony conviction ends up walking out of there with not guilty. And that record's automatically sealed now. So to get to know him through the year plus that I represented him, and, between court dates, things like that, talking about his family, his work, things like that. I mean, it's one of those moments where before a person gets the verdict in a case, I always sit with them and say, listen, here are the ways this could go. If it goes well, the clerk is going to read this, blah, blah, blah. If it goes poorly, though, you need to go ahead and give all of the stuff in your pockets to your family members. Their judge is probably going to take you into custody immediately. And it's one of those very sobering conversations with people because you're talking to somebody and the next time you talk to them, maybe through a cell door. And I remember having that conversation with him and it was very dark. He was like, well, where's my daughter going to sleep tonight? What am I going to do with my car that's in the parking lot? And I was like, well, who can I call? And then to be able to walk out with him after that, especially in a case that seems so hopeless, it's one of the best feelings to be able to walk out in a situation like that.
Maybe it's just because you're taking cases personally, which is why the victory tastes sweeter. I've heard this saying. The saying goes, you can never taste the sweetest of life's sweets if you never experience the bitterest of life's bitters. But every year, there are craziest cases, there are cases that unforgettable, the victories, but every year there's just this one case that stands out. Maybe it's because of complexity, public interest, or impact. What was the most notable case of 2025 for you? Did you turn the tide for Massachusetts because of this case?
So I think that one of the things I noticed this year is that the tide is definitely shifting in terms of the Second Amendment in Massachusetts and in favor of gun owners, in favor of us actually having a Second Amendment. Again, I mean, we talked about in our previous episodes what the state of the law is regarding suitability and how it's this discretion that the police department has to deny people for any reason and no reason, what it seems like. And we've seen a dramatic shift in the way courts are dealing with it now. And one of the biggest things is that it used to be that they could take away your gun rights based on what they call rank hearsay, which is hearsay within hearsay. Not only what somebody said, but what somebody said to somebody else, then said to somebody else. And you get this all the time. So it's like, if you live in Boston and there's a police report about you in Worcester that says that this person says you hit them in Worcester and then you're in Boston will immediately suspend your LTC without considering the fact that, is this person credible? Did this actually happen? Is there any other evidence for it? And then you talk to these licensing officers and you say, hey, well, did you do any investigation of this? No. And that used to be fine enough. Used to be good enough that they would just say, no, they don't have to do any sort of investigation. But now, since Massachusetts finally recognizes that there's such a thing as a Second Amendment, we've had luck arguing to judges that you can't take away someone's Second Amendment rights based on hearsay within hearsay. It has to be reliable. There has to be corroboration. There has to be some other evidence to point to this. And we've won 3 people their gun rights back based on that argument, that there isn't reliable evidence. I mean, we got the results in one from Quincy just a week or so ago, where they denied this guy. He was in his 40s and they denied him for something that happened in his 20s that was dismissed. Something that the police department just read a police report and said, oh, this guy seems kind of bad. They didn't care that it was dismissed in court. They didn't care the officer never showed up. They didn't care that no one ever proved it. They just looked at what one officer wrote and they said, nope, you're not getting your license to carry. We argued to the judge, that's not reliable. They didn't see any other evidence of this. So you can't take away someone's license to carry. One of our other lawyers won a case in Falmouth on the same thing. There was this accusation that our client hit his wife, but the wife said, no, that never happened. But it was in a police report. So the police department suspended his license to carry. And we argued that that's not reliable hearsay, that that's not reliable evidence to take away someone's constitutional rights. And we won. So those are all situations where I feel like the tide is shifting. That it used to be that you could just, oh, there was a bad police report about you from a couple of years ago, so we're going to take away your license. We're not going to give you your Second Amendment rights. And now it's shifting towards, no, you really have to have some at least reliable evidence to get there. Probably the most notable thing I noticed about 2025.
Amazing. 3 victories in 3 different courts, and it's making history, I believe, changing the tide with LTC cases.
Yeah, because it can just be such a tough area. I mean, we talk to people who talk to other lawyers, and they say, "Oh yeah, that other lawyer told me case was unwinnable,"
Mhm,
and then we go and win it. And it's yeah, I mean, Second Amendment rights are very important. There, you can't say that the Second Amendment is different from the other amendments. You
mhm.
can't just say that because if you start ignoring one, you start ignoring the rest of them too.
Yeah, that's true. And could you explain, like I'm five, these wins that happened in 3 different courts? It's something that people could refer to. Like this would be a case that's a reference for the future cases, right? Because it was a
Yeah,
decision by a judge in a district court, right?
yeah, it's precedent. So the judge in this case, we save these orders and we use them in future cases. We say, Judge in Salem, this is where a judge in Falmouth looked at the same issue and found for us. So yeah, we can definitely use those issues. A lot of times they aren't reported by the appeals courts because if it's a bad case, the lawyer on the other side often doesn't want to appeal it and make bad law. But we can still use those arguments and those things to say, Judge, you should do the same thing in this case that they did in that case.
So, do you believe that the only way to change the system in Massachusetts about LTCs and gun laws is to keep on appealing whenever you're getting denied?
Yeah, and I think that part of it is treating every case and fighting it as hard as you can and really showing the system for what it is and showing the judge that, like, even if they don't rule on you in that case, showing them that, hey, this is kind of ridiculous. This guy is in his 40s. He has kids now. He's had no problems with the law in the last 20 years. And we're holding something against him that happened when he was 25 years old. That's something that was dismissed. And you just say that forever takes away their gun rights. And the judge may not rule for us in that case, but they may start the judge thinking about it, or there may something like that. So it's just, and not to mention that a lot of times we win those, but it is about litigating it tough every single case and showing them that you mean business and showing them that you take this seriously. Because if you go in there and just say, my client's a good person, here's a letter from his mama. It says he's really nice and he helps wash the dishes. And you just present a couple of letters like that and you say, Judge, see, you should give him his license to carry. That's not right. That's not enough. And I've seen people do that. You've got to show the system for what it is. You've got to stand up there and say, Judge, this is the Second Amendment, just like the Fourth Amendment, just like the First Amendment, just like the Fifth Amendment. You can't ignore it. And you got to show them that.
We've had a lot of clients who showed that by trusting our law office. And truth be told, we love all of our clients. Who were your best clients this year, Matthew? Not names, of course, but in spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always impressed we talk a lot about our clients come to us at the worst time in their lives. We talked about that earlier, how they're coming to us when they're stressed out. They're coming to us when they're going through the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And it's always amazing to me how often they have so much grace with us, because it's easy if we're the only ones you can talk to about your case, it's easy to lash out at us. But I'm always amazed this time of year about how many Christmas cards I get from jails and prisons, from clients who I haven't been able to get them out, unfortunately. Or maybe they're doing a sentence for a case that we handled for them. And I get a Christmas card from them and they're wishing me a Merry Christmas and they're thinking about my family in that situation. And that's always the most amazing part to me is how often our clients really deal with these awful situations in a way of reflecting caring to us in that way. I mean, I don't know if I certainly have some great clients. I love all of my clients and I really care for all of them. So I don't know if I can say here's the best client, but that's something that's always impressed me about all of our clients.
Yeah, I've heard one phone meeting between an incarcerated client and you, and he goes on and starts off with happy holidays. How's your wife? How's your kids? How's your family? They they still start off the conversation with that. It's easier to lash out because you're finally getting someone who understands your situation and is doing something about it. But, they're still extending that grace, and you're really right about that. Well, Matthew, as we close out this year, any final message for everyone who's been listening and supporting us here at the Boston Barristers?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from this year is that us in Massachusetts, as gun owners, as people who care about the Second Amendment in Massachusetts, it's getting better. We're making progress. We've got to keep fighting. We've got to keep fighting every day to honor the heritage of the Second Amendment and to make sure that it's respected by the courts and everyone here in Massachusetts. But I guess the biggest thing for all of our clients and everyone out there is just that if this year was tough for you, like it was for pretty much everyone who comes through our doors because of what's going on with them, it's going to get better next year. You're going to get through this. This is something that's temporary. This is something that we're going to fight together and we're going to get through. I think that's the biggest thing is just this is always a time for me that I take and reflect. It's kind of slow as far as courts are closed. I do my best not to go to court this time of year between Christmas and New Year's. So I try to take that time to reflect upon what's important and what are our goals for next year. And for our clients, take some time to be with your family, be with who you care about, or take some time to yourself if you can. And let's get ready for the fight next year. The fight's still going to be there. We're still going to be there with you. But pause for a second. Just think about what's important to you. And let's get after it next year.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And that wraps our 2025 year-end special. Thank you all for an incredible year. We'll see you in 2026.
See you, everybody. Thank you.